we have the pleasure of hosting opposition party president of the Democratic Union of Zimbabwe, Chapman. Mr. Chapman, do I call you Rob?
Yes, you call me Rob, Robert.
Welcome to Washington, D.C., and welcome to Voice of America. What brings you to D.C.? Let's start from there.
Great question, and first of all, thank you for having me. And no short notice for us getting together, and I'm glad that we're able to meet. I'm actually here for the World Bank IMF Summit that is taking place in Washington, D.C., the Spring Summit that's taking place over the next few days.
Is this something the DUZ is keen on, has been keen on, or it's something that sprung up right there on your feet?
No, it's something we've been keen on. I was actually here at the fall event as well a few months ago in October, and been involved with some of the banks that are here, both personally and looking at trying to learn ideas and what other countries are doing well in regards to their development strategy. So this is something that we're very focused on, particularly based around our 3 pillars.
We'll come back to that. But the million-dollar question, I hear you threw your hat in. You threw your name in the hat for the 2023 presidential elections in Zimbabwe.
Yes, that is correct.
Are you ready? Is Zimbabwe ready for you?
Zimbabwe is ready. The welcome we're receiving in every city and province we go to has been absolutely phenomenal. So the welcome is very much there in the country right now.
So you have a presence already in all the provinces in Zimbabwe?
We do, yes.
And what are the key fundamental pointers for you as a political party?
There's a lot going on in our country at the moment, but the number one thing we're hearing across the board is the idea of jobs. People want jobs. The country is not working and people are not working, which creates a tremendous amount of problems that exist in their own personal lives. So we look at the DUZ, for example, we've got 3 pillars we're running on: prosperity, justice, and modernization. And prosperity is what a lot of people are really focused on right now. While we know as a government that's coming in, we want to ensure that the center part, which is the justice system, is what's going to allow people to remain prosperous, to not only create prosperity, but remain prosperous, and allows us to modernize the country. So right now, personally, there's so many problems in their personal lives that they know that they need jobs. So that has been our message, and we've been very consistent on that as we travel the country.
And how will you do that differently from the current government?
Oh, fantastic. First is nepotism, cronyism, and everything that comes underneath. The trust between citizen and government is completely deteriorated. So for us coming in, what we want to do is bring in private sector into the decisions that we'll be making as a party. And by doing that, one is we know that the long road of tackling justice is going to be a big part. But looking at our current employers in the country and trying to figure out what are the best ways for us to support them. We know that tax code is going to need to be updated and changed. We know that we need to start looking at key roles in each province. So each province sort of has a different avenue. Let's take Midlands, let's take Gweri, for example. If we look at the Bata plant that's there that used to employ 5,000 people, I think today is right around 150, 200. We want to go back and engage with that company and see how we can start ramping up and adding more jobs there. We want to start looking at, instead of importing a lot of items, how can we become the ones that start creating the products that we used to create back in the day? So we've got a pretty strong strategy that we'll share with the citizens as we travel around the country.
That's a very interesting point. People have a lot of social issues that are affecting them in Zimbabwe. I was watching you sometimes speaking on a different platform. You were talking about the elderly, the veterans, the pension funds. You were talking about the education system. You were talking about the employment you have just mentioned. Do you have a solid plan as a party that says we're going to do A, B, C, D to address the problems Zimbabwe is facing?
We do. We actually do. And we are proud to be announcing that as we announce our launch that'll be coming soon, we'll be sharing that document with everyone to tackle, break down, read, however they want to look at it. But yes, we can't solve all the problems in the country immediately, but there are starting points at each one of those that we look at. For example, you mentioned education. We look at the pension sector. We need to put that money back in. Taking care of our war veterans is a real serious issue. We look at peace and reconciliation, and that's divided in many factions, in many forms in our country. We see a huge polarization where there's tribal, religious, even regional, even racial. We see that disparity in our country. So for us, we have a strategy for each of these things where the country starts working together. I believe what happens is when we don't have jobs and we're not active as a citizen organization or citizens generally, we start to pick things, even the smallest things, and we make them mounds and mountains. For example, our teachers need working salaries. We need to make sure our teachers are taken care of. We need to make sure the schools are functional for kids to go to. Parents need need jobs to send their kids. We need a hospital system that is functional and is working, not just at the hospital level. We're talking population health, primary care, all the way into selective surgery.
It's a lot, man.
Yes.
It's a lot. I think we need more time to do this. I know today you have very limited time, but I won't let you go before you comment on the Al Jazeera documentary that's airing. What's your take on that?
You know, before we came, I wanted to see if it was out because I figured you would ask.
Or the last one?
The last one, it is not.
It didn't come out yet.
Not yet.
But you've watched the first, the second, and the third.
I have.
Give it a shot.
So, you know, knowing that corruption in Zimbabwe has been taking place is not new for Zimbabweans. What the document should really do is take us to now make a call for action. We have a serious, serious problem with corruption in the country, and we can spend a lot of time debating it. There comes a point where we have to start taking action as citizens. What's really disturbing about this is the ties of the smugglers and the individuals to the executive branch, right to the very top of the Zimbabwean government, including an official who's based in the UK. And the other side of this, news comes out that the lawyer of the very same smuggler who's implicated in this documentary is a leader of an opposition. So as Zimbabweans, we have to really introspect right now. If we're talking about really solving corruption, it cannot be done by the people that are involved in it. So we have to have a very serious conversation, which is very uncomfortable, but we have to start thinking differently if we're going to tackle this beast, which is corruption.
Talking about uncomfortable, I'm going to throw you under the bus before you leave. I had a very interesting question from one of our viewers watching on a live stream earlier. Do you have a policy on the LGBTQ communities and laws, the gays, in Zimbabwe? If you come into government, do you have a policy on that?
Yes, we do. So the first thing that we have to acknowledge is what's already in place there today. And does it adhere to human rights and what we would define as human rights? I think the country would have to decide that versus myself. But what we want is we know that there are Zimbabwean citizens that fall within the parameters of the LGBTQ. We want them to live comfortably and safely in our country. The adaptation, we can put policy in that grants them the freedoms or what would essentially be considered the human rights freedoms that are there. But there's a part of society that might take a while for that to catch on. And we saw that even here in the United States. Yes, while being gay or being able to love someone of the same sex had been passed in the 80s, society took a while to accept that as a norm as it came in. So while we may look at policy, I think the better thing we should look at is what is the culture of our country, and is our country prepared to enter that process? But as a government, we'll ensure that every citizen, regardless of what sort of silo they fall into, what religious, racial fall into, that they know they can live a comfortable life and a safe life in Zimbabwe.